I'm going to talk about navigating the challenges of a dramatically shifting energy landscape. And as Ryan said, our company is all we do is energy. We have to be paying attention to these trends. I'm going to start with a story of an experience that happened to me when I was just 12 years old. It was during the winter of 1976-77, which was a particularly harsh winter. And on a cold January night around 2 a.m., I was awakened by a police officer at the foot of my bed. You're probably thinking the same thing that I was thinking at that moment in time is, what mischievous thing had I done to warrant the visit of a police officer at 2 a.m. in the morning? It turns out that I hadn't done anything wrong, but our house had had a bomb threat. Our house had gotten a bomb threat because my father was the president and CEO of Columbia Gas of Ohio, which was the local gas utility. And in the 70s, the country was going through an energy crisis, and natural gas was a scarce commodity, and in a cold winter, my father had to determine who would get to use the natural gas. He chose homes and businesses over schools, and we actually shut down schools that year. So that was a very unpopular decision, and hence the bomb threat. So what I learned from that experience is that in America, we really have expectations for our right and access to energy. And when you take that away, people get upset. And they also look for somebody to blame. Now, my father was not responsible for the energy crisis of the 70s. That was bad federal policy that didn't allow for producers to drill for natural gas in an economic way, something that has since been remedied. But that was my takeaway. So what does that have to do with 2024? Well, there are experts that are predicting that we're potentially entering into our next energy crisis. This particular energy crisis would be with electricity. And the impetus to that would be that the demand for electricity is growing faster than new generation can be built. So the word crisis, I think, is debatable. I don't know if this is a crisis or an opportunity. I think the answer to that will depend on how the industry responds. But what does that mean if we don't have enough electricity? How will that play out? Well, first of all, if you're trying to expand your business and increase your production or build a new facility, you may not get access to electricity. The utility may say, I don't have it for you, and put you on a line, and maybe it's available 5 years from now. They should do that. We don't want to have more of a commitment to deliver electricity than we have. That's just the way it should work. The second thing would be that if there's a scarcity event like weather, like what happened with my father, the utility may decide who gets the power, or there might be rolling blackouts. That would be a short-term duration, and we've seen that happen in the country before. That's just, again, they're trying to protect the integrity of the grid. Don't give the utility company a bomb threat if that happens. But really, what really is going to happen is, like any marketplace, if the demand is greater than the supply, prices rise, incentivizing new production, new generation. That's an orderly market, and that's what got us out of the 70s. So I think that's what's going to occur. So I'd like to explain to you how we have gotten ourselves into this situation. For the remainder of my time, I'm going to talk about the history of energy in the U.S., the future state, and why we're having this growth of electricity, and some of the challenges of meeting that growth. And finally, not to just give you a negative report, I'm going to give you some maybe actions or things that you could do. So first of all, energy is good. All right, energy is, it's not the problem, right? Energy is essential for our human prosperity. We depend on our survival, and it's really become ingrained in the fabric of our human life. That hasn't always been the case. If we look back 250 years ago, and really this is an amazing period of time that we live in, starting with the Industrial Revolution, we've seen this amazing transformation in human society. So we have this Industrial Revolution that comes about, transforming into what we call the information age and the digital age. And the impact of this is that our population over the last 250 years has increased from 1 billion people to 8 billion people. Our quality of life has dramatically improved. Our lifespans have improved. We've reduced poverty. We've reduced malnutrition. The absolute rate of poverty and the percentage of people in poverty have been reduced. And all of these things are a result of technology and innovation, which is a great thing. And the one thing all these things have in common, these new inventions, is they use energy. They use a lot of energy. So our energy demand has increased dramatically over this time period. But that's a good thing, right? We have human prosperity fueled by energy. So there is a downside, though. This energy is creating carbon, and the carbon emissions have also increased dramatically during this time frame. Now, I'm not here to lecture people on climate change or even take a position. This is becoming a very political reality. There's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle trying to figure out, how harmful is the carbon. I'm just here presenting the facts. Our population is growing, our energy use is growing, and that energy use, the way we generate it today, is increasing our carbon. So what is our company going to do about it? Or what is the industry going to do about it? The way I look at it is we absolutely need to continue to supply the world's rising energy demand. Okay? That's not going to change. We need to do that if we're going to progress as a humanity. If we can do it while reducing carbon emissions, I think there wouldn't be a lot of debate about that. I think that the debate comes on how we're going to do this, right? So our company is focused on meeting the rising energy demands while reducing carbon emissions. There's two words that are not on the slide that I think should be, and that would be we're going to reduce the carbon emissions while maintaining affordability and reliability. And if I would add those two words, I would think that 90+% of the audience would agree that's probably a good effort and something to do. Okay, so how would we go about doing that? When I say we, the industry, how are we going to solve this problem of meeting the demand and reducing carbon? Well, first, where is our energy coming from and how do we use it? We use it for transportation. We use it for in the industrial sector to make things. We use it for residential, for heating our homes, heating, cooling, cooking, and on the commercial sector. And it comes from petroleum, coal, natural gas, nuclear, and renewables. Around 79% today in the U.S., and this is the U.S., around 79% of our energy today comes from fossil fuel. So if we're going to move away from fossil fuel, which is what creates carbon, I'm just presenting the fact that this is going to be a large effort. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot to do that. So I'm encouraged, however, over the last 15 years, we have been able to make some progress. We have actually reduced our carbon as an output as a country, from 6 billion carbon tons a year to 4.9. So it's about 18 to 20% decrease in our carbon output from 2005 to 2023. And how have we done this? We've moved away from petroleum and coal and replaced it with natural gas and renewables. So I'm encouraged by this, but the problem is going forward, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. And it's going to be more challenging because during this time period, the absolute amount of energy has been pretty much stagnant. It's about 99 quadrillion BTUs a year, and it's been pretty much unchanged. So we've had this relatively stable period of time where, and oh, by the way, we've been able to do this with also delivering on the other two words, which I mentioned was affordability and reliability. We've had a nice time period of robust energy supply that's been affordable, it's been reliable, and we've reduced our carbon. The challenge will be going forward. Going forward, we're forecasting an increase in the demand for electricity with three primary drivers: electrification, the reshoring of manufacturing, and then the advent of AI, Bitcoin, and data centers. So these three elements, and I'll go into them a little bit, they're impacting the future energy mix. And as you see on this graph, that green period is this period of stability that we've had, that we've been able to re-engineer some of our supply mixes. So what is electrification? It's a word that's probably you've heard before. You may not know exactly what that means, but really electrification is the process of using electricity to provide services that were previously met by other energy sources. All right. So this is the average use of of a home in Ohio that uses natural gas to heat their home, they'll use about 10,000 kilowatt hours annually today for electricity. If you remove their natural gas heat and replace it with an electric heat pump, then you're still going to need energy, you're just going to use electricity, and you're going to need 4,000 more kilowatt hours a year to generate that heat. If you go out and buy an electric vehicle and recharge it at home, you're adding another 4,000 kilowatt hours annually. So now you're up to 18,000 a year. And if you're all in on this electrification thing, you're going to buy a second vehicle, and now you're going to use 22,000 kilowatt hours a year as opposed to 10,000. So you've essentially doubled your electric use through electrification. The other driver is reshoring of manufacturing. This is a policy decision that we want to be making things in the U.S. that are important to our national security. The heavy tech industry, the chip manufacturing, these are things that we're reshoring, and there's incentives to do this. And this is a map of all the locations that have been announced since August of 22 of new factories that are going to be built. And then the graph on the right shows how much money we're spending in comparison to Europe to build these factories. So I personally think this is a good thing. It's good for the economy, and it's good for our national security. But when these plants come online, they're going to use more electricity. And then lastly, data centers. I think most of you might have been hearing about the insatiable energy demands of data centers, and that's true, and we're seeing it, and we're seeing that the projections are anywhere from 5% growth to 15% annual growth. And when this occurs, by 2030, the data center demand could represent 9% of our total electric demand. So it's just very staggering. And all three of these things are happening at the same time. Now, in order to meet this demand, we got to come up with the generation. And here lies a little bit of the problem, because we can't agree on what kind of. One more comment on the AI. Internet queries utilizing artificial intelligence require about 10 times the electricity of a traditional energy source. So it's just amazing. The amount of power that these data centers need, especially for AI, are just staggering. So the issue is how are we going to meet this demand? And the challenge is we can't agree on what kind of power to be built. Right? There's a very anti-fossil fuel mentality, and I understand it because there's a concern for the carbon, right? But there's definitely harder to build fossil fuel plants. I did mention that natural gas plants have been a part of reducing our carbon. Natural gas uses about half of the carbon as a coal plant, and so it's still a lower carbon source. But there's a negativity towards natural gas, and on the counter of that, there's also a negativity towards new solar. Solar consumes a lot of farmland, and there's an organized effort and a lot of aversion towards solar. So if we can't agree on if we're going to build renewables or gas, my personal opinion is we need both. We shouldn't be arguing about which. We need both to meet this energy demand growth. But right now, it's problematic and difficult to build new generation. But let's say we did agree on what kind of generation to build. The next thing you have to do is you have to build the transmission to get that power to the market. And that's another challenge, because who's going to pay for the transmission lines? If I build generation in Pennsylvania to serve data centers in Virginia and go through the states of Maryland and West Virginia to get it there, who's going to pay for it? Does Maryland pay for it because they have now access to this new generation? They may say, I didn't want it. So there's controversy and fights going on about who pays for this new transmission. Let's say that we can resolve that. Let's say that we can come to a consensus on what kind of generation we can build, who's going to pay for the transmission. Then we got to go about and start the actual process of building. Well, we haven't been in that build mode for 20 years, right? So the industry isn't really ready for this, and now we're starting to see a lead time problem for equipment. The lead time for transformers can be 3 to 4 years now. A year ago, it was up to 7 years. So I went through this very quickly. I think I was cognizant of making sure I do not go over. And I don't want to leave with just this at the thought that this is all doom and gloom, right? I'm an optimist. I think actually we have a great opportunity to rise up and solve this problem and fuel the growth for our country. And I'm going to leave you with a few takeaways that you might want to consider, all right? One, like I said, I think prices, and first of all, if you may not realize it, but in the U.S., we enjoy a very low cost source of energy. Like compared to the rest of the world, our energy costs are much lower than Asia and Europe. And I think we sometimes can take that for granted. If prices go up, which they should do in a well-functioning market to meet the rising demand, then there are now incentives to look at reducing energy. There may be things that you would invest in to reduce your energy, and that's a good thing. You may have the incentives now to self-generate. You could put solar on your roof, for example, and that could be a portion of your energy demand. The economics may make sense for you to do that if prices go up and if it's easier, if the cost of doing solar is lower. Our company does that. Our company helps our customers evaluate that opportunity and go ahead and implement it if it makes sense for them. The other thing is backup generation. If the grid starts to become stressed and there are going to be periods of rolling blackouts or interruptions, then you may want to invest in some type of backup generation. It could be diesel, it could be natural gas, it could be solar batteries, I don't know. But if you have that backup generation, I would also say that leads to an opportunity in a marketplace called demand response. And demand response is something that we do with a lot of our customers where they have a fully functioning backup system that they've put in place in order to make sure that they have resiliency if the grid goes down. But they can use that. By working with the grid operator to turn on during periods where the grid isn't going out, but the grid is under stress or prices are going really high. So you can monetize that asset and actually help make the grid more resilient. And by making the grid more resilient, you're helping solve some of these challenges of growth. So I think consumers, both businesses and homeowners, are going to have an opportunity to be more engaged in helping co-manage the grid. And I'm excited about that because I think there is a lot of opportunity for that to happen. The price signals and the rationale hasn't been there in the past, but there's a lot of assets out there that could be mobilized. And if you can do that, then that helps the grid grow a little bit faster. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, and I will be available at lunch.